For decades, we've been told that the Philippines should have more scientists, engineers, mathematicians, PhDs, that this would help the country in the race for the technology and the innovation needed to create more and better jobs and businesses. One way to do that is to keep more girls and women in the scientific fields. Professor Didith Rodrigo, a PhD in computer technology, has a prescription for that and a relatively unexpected tool to try to help keep girls and women in science. Professor, thank you very much for inviting us to your lab.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
So what kind of work goes on here?
This is the Ateneo Laboratory for the Learning Sciences, and we're interested in the uses of computer technology in education specifically. So we're interested in creating applications that engage learners. We're also interested in analyzing data from learners to find out how they're feeling, first of all. So are they confused? Are they frustrated? Are they bored? These are feelings that are very relevant to the learning experience.
So unlike most labs, you don't have beakers, Bunsen burners, and the like here.
No, we don't.
It's all in the computers.
We have a lot of computers. We have instruments that measure things like what they call galvanic skin response, for example, which is a measure of how, I'm going to use the word aroused, but it doesn't mean something bad. It just means how
aroused is not necessarily bad.
No, it's not necessarily bad, but it's an indicator of, it could be an indicator of engagement, but it's an indicator of high emotion.
So I'm sure that in grade school and in high school, I think you were St. Sco.
Yes, St. Sco Manila.
You did well in math and science. What got you into computer science?
When I was in high school, in third year and fourth year, we had a computer programming class. And I was actually very surprised that I took to it quite naturally. It was one of those things that made perfect sense.
So it was required?
It wasn't required. It was an elective. We were given a choice, and that is the subject that I chose.
What were the other choices?
There were things like there was drama, there was fine arts, there was accounting, and I gravitated towards programming because I was interested in the science.
Now, what kind of, you were talking about the kinds of cool things you work on here. Can we see some of those?
Of course.
Okay. So we're here with Joe and with Brent. What is Joe working on?
Joe is demonstrating part of an experiment that we're conducting at the moment. We're looking at we're studying how programmers read and debug code. What she has on screen is a program that we've written, and we have deliberately inserted errors in it, and we're essentially asking our test subjects to try to find the error. What you see on the screen, the dots and the lines, are actually a trace of Joe's eye movement.
So her eyes are going all over the text that way?
Yes. The bigger the circle, the longer she's dwelling on a particular spot, and the lines just mean that her gaze is going from one point to the other.
And that can tell you she's bored or tired or?
Well, it can tell you if, it's a proxy indicator of how she's thinking about the code. And you're right, if she's dwelling on a particular spot for too long, it could be because she's confused. She doesn't understand it, and therefore she has to think about it, expend more mental energy trying to analyze it. If she's zipping around too quickly, it could be that she's bored. Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Now, there's a name for what Brent is using. In rapper speak, this would be called the mood meter. What is it really?
This is called an emotive insight. It's an instrument that was created by the company called Emotive that measures brain signals, or EEG. You'll see that there are 5 sensors on Brent's head, and they correspond to the 5 dots that you see in the diagram. And those 5 dots pick up brain signals, and the instrument and the software working together then interpret the signals so that you find you can get things like whether a person, they interpret the signals this gives you an indication of how interested or excited or engaged the test subject
And
is.
the application of this would be what?
When we ask students to use, let's say, a math tutor, are they interested in what they're doing, or are they confused or bored?
So it's a way to gauge or measure somebody's tools.
Somebody's emotion. Yeah, it's an instrument that we use for measuring our test subjects.
Great. Your latest project now is the decidedly low-tech, or these decidedly low-tech children's books, where you talk about women scientists, Filipino women scientists. What made you write these children's books?
The overarching reason was really because science is, you mentioned earlier that science is really a driver for progress. And for us as a nation to be more competitive, especially with Industry 4.0 upon us, we need more people in the sciences to innovate, to create these new products, new jobs that 3 years ago were unheard of. I mean, so expertise in, well, I'm in computer science, expertise in things like data science are all the rage now, because these are the things that make the Google driverless cars and the recommender systems and stuff like that. These are the technologies that make those kinds of products possible.
But your focus is on girls.
Yes.
These books are targeted at girls.
These
Why
books
is
are,
that?
the Philippines is ahead of certain nations, of a lot of nations, in terms of the number of girls in science and technology fields. There was a report that came out, I think 2 or 3 years ago, about women in science and technology in Asia. And it was interesting because we're actually ahead of our neighboring countries. We have greater representation in the sciences, in engineering, among the PhDs.
It doesn't surprise me.
Right.
This country is ahead. The women in this country are ahead in a lot of measures.
True. And yet, as they, and even in professions, whether they be government, NGO, private sector, in the science and technology fields, you'll find slightly more women than men. However, as they move up the ranks, there are fewer and fewer of them. So if you look at the number of outstanding young scientists, the percentage of outstanding young scientists, the national academicians, the national scientists, the percentages actually get lower, which means that we suffer from what the report calls a leaky pipeline. So we lose some of them, and I think there are many reasons for that. One of the reasons is women tend to take care of their families. Marriage, childbirth, caring for the family, that's a big factor, and it's not at all a bad thing. I think it makes a lot of sense that we prioritize our families, but that also means, we suffer from those losses, and so we need more. We just need a greater mass. That's what it means to me, and so hopefully with greater participation from girls, we'll get that mass that we need.
How did you come upon the idea of writing about it and writing children's books?
Okay. Bookmark Inc. Has a series of books on heroes for the Filipino youth, and I was invited to write for the series. When I looked at the books, there were many books on priests, nuns, soldiers, politicians, but I noticed there was nothing about scientists. And I asked, is it all right if I write about a woman of science? And at the time, it was, they said, of course they said yes. And
that's this.
Yes,
that's this one.
Yes, on Dr. Lourdes Cruz.
Passion for Science. So this is the first one.
That was the first
4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
Right? So when you started to think about the project, you came up with 4 criteria.
Yes.
They needed to be published. They needed to be leaders. They needed to be working in the Philippines.
Yes.
Why did you set those criteria?
Well, there are many Filipino scientists who work abroad, and that sort of made the scope a little too large, first of all. But I think it was important to me that they were here, and we know without any intention to disrespect the people who have chosen to live abroad. That's fine. They have their reasons. It's really okay.
In fact, the partner, her partner
Dr.
here,
Cruz is based in the U.S.
and helped her from there.
Yes. But I really needed to narrow the scope, and so I focused on the women who were here. And I think I wanted to also send a message that it was possible to do science here in the Philippines. Because I think that's an impression that many people have, that you must go abroad in order to excel or to push the field forward. And I'm not saying that's not true. There's merit in that, of course. But it is possible to do good things here, I think. And I wanted that to be part of the message.
Was it difficult to find the pen?
It was difficult to... I think I was striving for a good spread, and so it was challenging to find a good spread, because even as scientists, we are familiar with our own communities, and it's difficult for us to recommend people outside.
In fact, you didn't include any computer scientists in this in this series.
I thought that might be a little self-serving. But for example, if I ask a chemist to recommend somebody, they'll only recommend chemists. If I ask a physicist, they'll only recommend physicists. If you ask somebody, if I ask people in Ateneo, they'll tend to recommend people in Ateneo. And I tried to get representation from various fields and from various universities, and as much as possible from different parts of the country.
You have one or two, or maybe even three from Mindanao.
I have three from Mindanao. I have two from the Visayas, I think, yeah.
So was that difficult to try to find all of those?
You know, it was challenging. I had to ask, because I was asking my friends in those places, and they were hard-pressed to think of a few names.
And even when you came up with some of the names, some of them weren't very excited to be part of the project.
Because it was weird. It was weird. I wrote one of them, and she didn't even answer me. So one of our mutual friends had to write her and vouch for me, that I wasn't just some crazy person with this ridiculous idea of writing children's books. However, one thing I have to say is that the people who did respond didn't say no. In fact, these were all sort of my first choices. I didn't have to resort to a second set. And I think what made the project appealing to them was I said that I would talk about their work. I think if I said I would talk about you, then they would be more hesitant to say yes.
Was it difficult to laymanize these stories? And not just laymanize, but make them accessible for children?
It was, because they tended to go into great technical detail. And so one of my favorite examples was Dr. Jinky Bernales, who is the subject of Random Walks. She wanted to be described as specializing in white noise path integrals. And I said, ma'am, can we, this is for children, so can I use other words? And she's like, but that's really what it is. I said, okay.
That's the layman version.
That's the layman's version. In fact, when the National Book Development Board and Bookmark was reviewing the manuscript, they pointed it out also and said, do you really want to say it like this? And I said, well, unfortunately, that's how it is.
They were happy with the product, of course.
They were. What I did was I would write out the manuscript and I would send it to them, and so we would iterate, and they would send me comments. They would send me corrections.
One of them said her mother was very happy.
Yes, Gemma Narisma. Yes.
That's this book.
Yes.
And it said it made her. She said that the cover at least made her look very fierce.
Yes.
Actually, with the shield and the sword, it's kind of
Wonder Woman. True, but this predates the movie. Yes.
One of the things I liked about the books is they show many of these scientists outdoors. For women and children who might think working in a lab is not their thing, this shows people looking for bats, going into caves, going underwater, having to learn how to scuba dive. That was interesting to me. Is that a big part of scientific work?
For a surprising number of fields, it is very much, fieldwork is an integral part of many fields, more than you would realize. Even for us, and we're in computer science, we have to go out and go to visit schools in order to collect our data. And you have some rather serious technical problems. You have got problems with connectivity, problems with computer viruses. There was one relatively recent fieldwork push that we had to stage. We were in a public school just here in Quezon City, and we already brought, well, the public school had very limited internet access. So we brought already hotspots from Smart, Sun, and Globe, and none of them worked. And so, because the computer lab was very much indoors, and it was surrounded by concrete, so I don't think any of the signals could make it through. So we moved the computers out into the foyer in front of the principal's office. It was covered, but you know, it was in a very public place, so we were conducting our experiments and the students were passing by and all that, and then it started to rain. Oh my God.
That's what you were referring to earlier when you said it's very difficult to do science in the Philippines.
It can be, yes.
So you're comp sci, your husband is lapsed comp sci. Was it inevitable that your only child entered the sciences?
I was kind of hoping that she would go into the fashion industry, but can't have everything. She was very interested in math and science from the start, and she's currently working in the physical oceanography lab of UPMSI.
Your books focus on very accomplished Filipino scientists. What work is going on out there in the scientific communities in the Philippines? Maybe by some young scientists like your daughter that excites you?
There's a lot of work going on in data science. This is the field that takes masses and masses of data from computers, cell phones, even fitness trackers.
Big data.
Big data, exactly. And analyzes them for interesting patterns. Finding these interesting patterns can result into products and services that are highly personalized. In my daughter's field, there's of course, you're aware of the Benham Rise, for example. So there's a lot of surveying that's being performed in that area. It's our new territory, and so she does some of the. She and the team in UPMSI do modeling of currents, and it's very interesting for her. I mean, she's quite excited about it.
So she's modeling.
True. Modeling data.
Some of this work is going to lead to technology that will mean some Filipinos, for example in the BPO industry, losing their jobs, or at least not creating jobs at the same pace.
We're hoping that the challenge is to provide people with new tools and new skills. And we're hoping that by helping people gain the expertise in math, science, programming, computer science, and engineering and so on, that they will be equipped to engage in these new industries and be, in fact, the drivers that will create new products and services that will benefit them and benefit the country economically.
Professor Didith Rodrigo, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.